Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Chris. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hey, Tom. Great to be here with you again. My name's Chris Shrope. I work for a company, software provider called Model N. We're a revenue optimization and compliance leader for life science and high tech innovators. And we help our customers and with how they manage revenue, manage compliance worldwide, and life sciences, high tech, very complex from a supply chain standpoint, an economic standpoint, and a regulatory standpoint. And I am a product marketeer at the company. So working with product market fit, messaging and positioning, and ensuring that we have the right awareness and consideration in the market.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about Model N. I mean, you mentioned a little bit there, but what kind of size organization is it? Where are you based? How long you've been in business? That kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, we actually we've been in the business, been running software, this mission critical software for over 20 years. Next year actually is our 25th year anniversary.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, we deal with some of the largest manufacturers in the world, from life sciences, pharmaceutical, med tech, and high tech manufacturing. And we help them run their commercial operations, somewhat juxtaposed from many of y'all's procurement offices. But we help these manufacturers. We have an intelligent platform that powers digital transformation, integrating, technology, data, analytics. We also have expert services for our clients as well, so that we can deliver deep insight and control for them in their process. We have a number of solutions across. We're vertically focused, as you've noticed, the company. And so we have a number of solutions purpose built for each of our segments that help automate pricing, incentives, contract decisions, so that these manufacturers can scale their business profitably and grow as they deliver all of these life-changing products to the world. Modeling right around, I think, 1,000 employees, plus or minus, right? And we're trusted in 120 countries across the globe. And I'd say what we continue to do always for our customers is help unlock growth and profitability through, making business process improvements, using data and analytics to help them not only deliver these life-changing products, but do it in a way that's responsible, and making sure like compliance is a huge issue. Make sure that they're not, overstepping any boundaries, which might get them in get some negative press, and certainly a bad reputation amongst other industry oversight. So hopefully that helps.
Yep. And where does the name Model N come from?
That's a great question. Yeah, I've only been at Model N for a couple of years now, but the company's obviously changed hands a couple different times, from the founder gone public, and there's always changing ownership structures. But the way it's always been told to me, and I'm an employee at the company, is that Model N, the N stands for next. So it's Model Next. And what that is intended to embody is that we are the next frontier for manufacturers to innovate. We Model Next is kind of like we are using, the best practices and technology to build our products and deliver that to our customers, so that they can be delighted and deliver an excellent experience to their customers, and so on and so forth. So that's a short story, and I don't have the full story, but hopefully that helps.
Lost in the mists of time. Fair enough. Fair enough. This is obviously the Sustainable Supply Chain podcast, Chris. So
Yeah.
bring it home for me. Why is Model N on the Sustainable Supply Chain podcast?
Great question. Many of the audience is also asking the same question, right? So when a number of years ago now, back during my baccalaureate years, I studied actually alongside economics. I studied environmental studies, and I was super interested in economic combination. During my years, one of the professors in the environmental studies department was very forward thinking, sold had a great way to explain sustainability. It can be used in so many different ways, right? But at the core of it, the idea is that sustainability has to be three things, kind of like the golden triangle in project management.
Okay.
It has to be sustainable for the people, profit, and the environment,
Sure.
right? And I think this is years and years before ESG became the coined term, right? But people matches very closely with social, profit matches very closely with governance, because you have to in order to stay in business, it has to be sustainable. Like if we were to take one business practice, like price gouging, for example,
Uh-huh.
right? Say there's a shortage of supply for gasoline. You always see it. All the gas stations increase, what they sell at the pump, right? But if you're caught price gouging, there are laws, right? If you do it to an excess of 10%, this is taking advantage of people. This is not only unfair from a moral, ethical standpoint, but there are also laws like California and others that essentially say that you cannot gain off of another person's pain.
Okay.
And so, I think we fall very closely in this profit bucket. And then the planet very closely ties to the environmental side. And when it comes to manufacturing, there's a huge environmental footprint. And the industries that we play a part of, life sciences, high tech, the complexity of the supply chain there's so many characters and hands and partnerships that have to bringing one product to every single one of us. And so that's where I and we see ourselves playing in this sustainability space, if you say. And we support it with technology. Now, we're not going to be the one solution that you come to solve my ESG problems.
Sure.
And I would argue that it's actually not one vendor at all. It's going to be, especially when you have so many channel partners, distributors, others in the channel that are selling your product to anyone around the world, the end applications are, numerous, that you're going to need a combination of solutions. Some solutions are going to be better for collecting data, making sense of it. Others are going to be better for doing carbon accounting from a transparency, integrity perspective. And so, hopefully that kind of like answers the question of why are we here and what do we have to offer for a sustainable supply chain future?
And so, how do your solutions help organizations with their sustainability goals?
Yeah, sure. What I would say, so just quickly, I want to state there is a Morgan Stanley survey that was recently done, and they asked companies and executives what their thoughts on a number of different topics, and sustainability was one of the main topics in that survey. And one of the key takeaways, is that 80% of companies see sustainability as a potential revenue and profitability driver. So 80% of the market, at least by Morgan Stanley that was surveyed, believe that sustainability is actually going to be profitable for them. And every single one of us in a company, whether it's the company I work for, whether it's any of the number of companies out there in the world, your own business as well, every single person adds value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the issue is that, we only have a very small window to capture that value. And that value is captured typically during a negotiation phase or a purchase decision where a price is quoted, sold, orders are placed. And there's a tremendous, I think, opportunity when we talk about sustainability of creating value. And where we come into the picture is how can you now capture it? We help companies, price, quote, manage contracts, how they run incentive programs. And then also we build in the visibility from the channel back to your frontline operation. So you can see what's happening way out in the far distance. Some reseller sells your component or your component bundled in a product to a retailer, and then that's sold to an end user like you or me. We can collect, standardize, enrich, and send all that data back so that you can have it at the time of quoting, of the time of actually capturing value. So you understand what market demand shifts are taking place, what are the price points that are currently being purchased, for this product or combination of products in the market, how is it being bundled? And this gives you a sense of real-time end customer demand. And then you can match that with, you have your existing orders in place and other market drivers. You can match this together to get a clear view on what actually needs to be produced. With a clear visibility and demand, you can understand how to supply, right? We always like basic economics. We want supply and demand to be equal because this creates the most surplus for everyone. Now, it's not often the case. And this is where you need data visibility to drive that type of control. And when we think about like what you have control over as a manufacturer, you have control over what you produce, how much you produce of it, and what are the input supplies that you use to produce that. And then you have your whole, supply chain network or channel partners that go and then buy, purchase, sell, and distribute this across the world. And right there is scope, are the scope of emissions, right? Now, scope, so overproduction, if we think about like scope 1, 2,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't overproduce, this is a great benefit for you and society. Using less material as you're matching demand and keeping the market in equilibrium. I guess, I don't want to do it. I guess I will do this. Going back 4 years ago during COVID, I know we're going back there, but I think everyone in the world's eyes were kind of open to how important this high technology is to our lives. Semiconductors, electronic components, when all the fabrication plants basically shut down and all this end consumer demand was going through the roof. People were buying, they're working from home. I'm buying laptops. I'm buying this. I'm buying that. There was a huge kind of shortage in component, all these base commodities that go into what create a, computer that we're using right now, you and me. And that overproduction is a huge cost from an environmental standpoint for whoever is purchasing it, because now the prices are a lot higher. And so if you can better match demand with what you're producing, it's going to keep the market in equilibrium. It's going to save you on your scope, 1 and 2 emissions. And then I guess there's the scope 3, which is, a whole nother bucket.
Yeah. Scope 1 and 2 are obviously within your own domain and reasonably easy enough to capture and control. Scope 3, a lot more nebulous and harder to control. Is that something you can help customers with as well?
Yeah, it's a great area to point out. Like I said, I think it's going to be a combination of solutions. But when it comes to scope 3, I guess we'll fact check this later, but I believe it's around like 80 to 90% of emissions of your emissions are scope 3 emissions.
Hmm.
And a large, it's for the industries that we serve, a majority of that is coming from that channel distribution, the movement of this product at the end of the day, which happens. You have the high tech component manufacturer selling, collaborating with like design manufacturers and OEMs, and then selling to contract manufacturers. They might be buying packaging. Then there's the distributors, resellers, brokers, SIs, and there are retailers, and all of these individuals can play a part in, I think, the data visibility aspect of scope 3. There's It's so hard to get that data though, right?
Yeah.
At least it is today. But what I would say is that the companies that we serve, and many of the large manufacturers out there have been collecting channel data for years. They collect channel data for their critical, business operations. We have supply chain professionals that collect channel data, revenue professionals, and many others. And they do this, and it's they do this so that they can match what was sold to what they need to now earn, matching based off of like, incentive programs or other elements of a channel program. And there's no reason that this data, scope 3 emission data, cannot also be passed. You get the amount of data points that we can collect is very interesting. And I think, if we sending, ship to locations, and if we can capture all of that from the very end customer back, kind of backtracking to
Hmm.
you as the manufacturer, I think this, from a supply chain mapping exercise, gives you great visibility, but then it gives you now the action to say, okay, how can we improve? I understood that you, Mr. Distributor, sold to XYZ Corp on the East Coast. And I also see that you sold on the West Coast. Now, we've identified that you're our distributor for the East Coast. And actually, we have a separate West Coast distributor, and we've set this up. You set up, your channel partners in a way so that you can hide the highest penetration in the market. And if one distributor or reseller or whoever is selling in another region they're not supposed to, also means that the shipment of products is going in a place that wasn't intended to. And this is additional cost from a distribution logistics perspective. And quite frankly, it doesn't do them a good service, and doesn't do you a good service, because that means that they had to undercut someone else to make a deal on the West Coast, and the other distributor now is confused. But that's a little out of the nebulous of sustainability and supply chain. So why don't we bring it back now?
Sure. Um, a lot of this requires a lot of data sharing, and organizations typically, traditionally, have been slow and cautious about opening the kimono and letting other people see their data. Is that something that's starting to shift? Are people starting to be more collaborative about that?
I would say yes. Look, I mean, I get the hesitancy. You don't want it to look like you weren't doing something good the whole time, or that you're catching up now. Like, that's a brand reputation PR move. But I think, at least in the circles that we play in at Model N, with the manufacturers that we serve, yes, there, I think, has been a historical, at least on the high tech side, a historical kind of adversarial relationship between the manufacturers and distributors, kind of fighting over, who's going to get what piece of the business.
Mm.
But where channel collaboration is something that has definitely been seen in a different light as of recent. And I think it's all around, how can we coordinate as a vertical, as an industry, as a market, to not have some of the pitfalls that we saw a couple of years ago, where there was all this overproduction, underproduction. Now you can still see it. Like, we're still today catching up on our integrated circuit unit shipments. Like, because of that, yeah, there are all these, we're doing really good on the leading edge, but all these analog integrated circuits are still catching up. There's, I think, a greater sense of we need to be a coordinated market, because there are so many areas that things can fall through the cracks. And we at Model N actually launched a product not too long ago, about 6 months ago, called Channel Collaboration. This is a channel partner portal where your channel partners can log into, as well as you, to understand their channel data programs, what file formats they need to submit, how to submit. There's, when you do submit data, it goes through we have a very sophisticated and robust processor for standardization, enrichment, deduping, matching, validation, and others. And this ensures that when the channel data is submitted from the channel, the manufacturer gets it back in a clean format so that it can be used by supply chain and by other critical downstream functions to manage actively, proactively manage this instead of reactively management, which I think it is where the industry had been on a number of these issues.
And I mean, we've talked about things like emissions data, scope 3, that kind of thing. What about the S and the G from ESG? The S and the G of ESG. Is that something you're helping customers with as well?
Yes, most certainly. Let's go. I guess we'll go in order. So the S, social. When we think about having responsible and sustainable supply chain, this means having responsible partners in that. Your suppliers, your channel partners. Look, everyone's going to have, a roster of their preferred suppliers, their preferred buyers, and you want to be as high up on that roster as possible so you can get the most business, be kind of at that epicenter in your space. And what we do is we provide for companies, who have many channel partners running, channel programs. We have these channel partner scorecards, which actually provides a benchmark and a, KPIs to measure Mr. Distributor, Mr. Reseller. We are working together on a number of these programs. This is what we want to see from a data perspective, from a selling perspective. And then based on performance, these partner scorecards get filled out as the data comes in and allows for quick, anytime you have a QBR with that, with that other entity, you can bring this up. We're not on target. We need it. We need you to be here. Here's a way to do that. And so we can really kind of prescribe ways to identify the best performing, the worst performing, and those who just need a little nudge from basically creating responsible supply chain partnerships. And then on, the governance side, this is an area where we actually have seen quite a bit of uptick in, the most recent, I guess, couple of quarters. And this is, I think the most recent uptick is due to some of the geopolitical tensions around the world.
Yep.
Where we have still the ongoing Ukraine Russian conflict. We have Israel, Gaza. There's, there has been heightened tension in, between China and Taiwan, which hasn't necessarily been new, but all of these are kind of bringing to bear the need for more compliance from a governance perspective. This is how am I going to manage risk? Who am I going to do business with? How am I going to do business? The transparency, integrity behind that. And I'll just mention, I mentioned the conflicts. And so when a drone, is shot down in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians look on the inside and see all of these US chip manufacturers' components,
Mm-hmm.
it starts to raise, the alarm is raised now. Governments are now asking questions. Um, Audits are being done where audits had traditionally been done. And I think this is, that's the way it is. Not everyone knows the rules. Like ideally, you go on business, you understand the rules, but as your business evolves, so do the rules and the laws and the current morals, ethics of the time period. And so if you hadn't done an audit, you might now need to do an audit. And upon that audit, realize that, wow, this distributor that I had is in Turkey is selling to Iran. They only have license or distribution rights to sell to other areas in that region. And this is a way that you can, through identification and an audit, ethical business practices, say, hey, you need to have your own internal control process, Mr. Distributor or whoever, because now this is impacting my business and my ESG goals. And I guess I could keep going on. Yeah, I'll let you.
Yeah. Do you have any customer success stories you can point to?
So we have, if you can go to the Model N website, and we have plenty of customer success stories. And from a high-tech manufacturing perspective, we have customer success stories across, how companies are negotiating deals, how they're managing incentive programs, how they're managing channel data programs. And from the channel data management perspective, companies that have signed on with us, some of the elements that they have reported on is that since having Model N, they've seen a 99% reduction in channel data intervention, meaning that now with a solution like ours, they're confident that the data that's coming into them is verified and is actually actionable, is not duplicate, is not masked incorrectly from the supply chain itself. Another stat, customers have seen 90% average on-time reporting. So that if you need your channel data at a certain period of time, say you want emissions channel data 2 weeks before the end of your quarter, so that your teams can then incorporate that into your analysis of carbon emissions and
Sure.
update this into your ESG report. This is an area where if you need accurate on-time data, customers, this has been a 90% improvement. I have a couple other ones as well. Same thing on the on-time reporting. Many times our manufacturers, they get data from the channel. They were getting on a quarterly basis. When they come with us, we can move them from quarterly to monthly and to daily partner reporting.
Wow.
And when you have all this data, it helps you, like I said, the visibility and control. And after implementing a channel data management program, some of our customers have also seen a 50% increase in distributor compliance. And when I say distributor compliance, that means if a company is supposed to be selling a certain product in a certain region, or bundled with a certain thing, another component, they're complying to that. They're not going to be, selling from Turkey to Iran when they're not supposed to, for example.
Sure.
And the list kind of goes on and on, but I don't want to. We have plenty of them on our website, and I'd implore, if you are interested, to learn about it through modeln.com.
Okay, cool. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Chris. Is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
Yes, I love this topic. I wish we could talk about it all day. But I do think there's a huge opportunity for companies to leverage channel data and leverage it to achieve their sustainability goals in their supply chain or for their business in general, whether it's reducing emissions reducing the amount of inventory in the channel, overproduction, underproduction issues, how you choose who you do business with by vetting them, auditing them, having, scorecards. But I think, like I had mentioned, like at the beginning, 80% of companies see sustainability as a potential revenue and profitability driver. I think that revenue and profitability needs to be brought more into this conversation. If we're, like I said, if every single thing that we do, every employee, every practice that we do is supposed to drive value for the business, but we only have this small fraction to capture that, we should include those companies, because they're doing things today like channel data programs to collect this critical data from the channel. They're running incentive programs. And I think an interesting thing that maybe a future podcast, right, topic is, how can I put together incentive programs or add an additional onto an incentive program for sustainability channel data, so that, say you have an incentive program out there from your distributor to send a certain amount of data. Well, if they added an extra couple of parameters from what they have from their logistics software and bring that in, then maybe they get an extra 0.2% on that rebate, right? And 0.2% on 1,000,000 units can be a lot. And so I think there's an opportunity of saying, let's bring everyone to the table, including the revenue teams, to help solve the sustainability challenge.
Cool. Okay, great. Something to think about, definitely. So, Chris, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Sure, certainly. You can follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, Chris Shrope. Be more than happy to chat.
Superb. Great. Chris, that's been fascinating. Right. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Pleasure.